Alright, I'm doing a real quick video just so I can kind of go through and help some people. I had people talking about how they couldn't spot as well, or they were getting some severe stuttering or graphic issues in the game. So I'm going to go through the settings here on the control panel. I'm going to use this image here as the one to basically show off the settings so we can talk about it. So these are not my settings, but I just don't want to get into the control panel. I'm going to use this as an example. Alright, so there is no setting here to turn bloom on and off, by the way. Detailed res isn't really represented in this. The default is usually, I believe, the second number of the screen resolution. It'll just auto default. So you just have to look at it. I think it's 1040 sometimes. You want your detailed res in your VR to be equal to the lowest number, which is in the HP Reverb, which is their base resolution, 2160. I was telling people to do double that. You can, but it does squish the image. So you're going to get tighter dots. The reason it doesn't affect your FPS as much or anything like that is because the computer doesn't have to render as much either. So you're basically just shrinking that image and stretching it out at the 4300. But at this setting, which is native to the resolution, it's going to make the image a little bit better, and that will help. So you can try that, and you can go down even lower. You can go down, next level, next level. You can keep dividing that in half until it looks like garbage. The next one you want to look at is there are far blocks is basically here. That is the distant building settings. FPS counter obvious, FPS limit we don't use. Height and width, that's just your monitor setting. That's the screen resolution. Doesn't actually represent that. That's more represented here. That's the screen resolution showing here, for example. This would be your monitor, whatever your native for your flat panel would be. Those two numbers here. So I just set it to the same because it avoids some bugs. Alright, if there are any. Full screen obvious, you see all that here. Grass distance, you can turn that up or down. That's going to help you on FPS. So if you want to just grab some FPS, turn the grass down to off or normal. You really don't need to have the grass on at all. You don't need to have it on. So you can turn that off in here. I recommend going through, if you don't know how to do all of this, just do the settings and then come back and make sure you change this one, because you're going to have to update that, and make sure your bloom is off, and then just save. So you can do everything in here. Just so you guys understand, MSAA is anti-aliasing at a distance, and then having that off at FXAA, that is near anti-aliasing. Okay, there is no target FPS in VR. Dynamic resolution. This is basically smoothing. It's the best way to explain it. So it's no different than if you turned on motion reprojection in the game. It's doing, or in the VR. You will notice by dropping this number down. For me, I noticed immediate hit to resolution right away. So the graphics got worse and worse. So where you look at the planes, they would be like from 1980 or something, video games. So rather than having the clarity and the beautiful part of this game, it gets lower. If you have like a 1080 card or lower, like a three generations back video card, yeah, you might have to do that. But before I started messing with this, I would turn everything else off. I would turn off sharpen. I would turn off the 4K textures. Of course, you're not doing any of the VSync. The main ones in VR that I use, of course, is HDR, because the graphics look a little bit better to me. But if you don't like that, you can turn that on and off. That's just a type of rendering it does. Sharpen, again, that one hits FPS because it's adding a black line to everything. It can make it easier for lower resolutions. If you're under rendering your goggles and you don't know what that is, look it up. But that means that you're taking the resolution, which is native, 3092 by whatever, and you're cutting it down 80% or whatever. That can do that. Clouds are going to be the biggest hitter. Shadows the biggest hitter. Mirrors not so much. Distant details. This is a big FPS hitter, guys. Normal is the game. Okay, everything above that is you're adding additional. So It's just the distance of the bubble around the airplane that's going to have perfect detail of all the items below you. So two grids out, it normal I believe is like you'll see everything, all the roads, the buildings, everything perfectly drawn in. And beyond that, the buildings and stuff will still be showing, but the trees become more cartoon drawn in, and all of that just reduces. Canopy reflections, I mean, if you like it, fine, but that's the FPS hit in VR. I don't recommend having them on. Horizon distance is another FPS hitter. 150 is probably the sweet spot if you can get there, but I mean you can always back it down. Landscape filter, that's a big FPS hitter, but if it's not on sharp, it makes it really difficult to identify planes on the deck when you're up high. So if that's an issue, that is probably one of them. Try it off or sharp. Definitely a blurred you can look at, but usually what I found in blurred, it also blurred the airplanes. So grass quality, obvious, off. FSAA and so on. Anti-aliasing, you can cut that back, so even if you're at 4 times, if you're like on a 2080 or something smaller, back that up, turn it off. You really don't have to have anti-aliasing to do the main portions of what the game is going to do. You're going to still get some sharpening coming out of the FSAA, but with it completely off, all of that kind of turns off because there is nothing for them to really sample other than some of the other items. So you'll have to play with it and look at what you're getting. You can also back down sharpening in the game, for open if you're using Toolkit, which you should be using. All right, so Toolkit. I want to go into Openxr Toolkit real quick and just go through that. This is going to be a real quick, dirty video that I'm doing. I'm not going to do a lot of editing or anything. So if you look at the latest updates, go in and take a look at what they're doing. The real big one, Turbo, guys. All Turbo does, if you want to understand what these features are doing, you can go in and see what each of the ones he's added in. The Turbo mode, like you can see right here, all it is doing is it turns off. Like he says, this is experimental. Don't use it if it's messing your system up. But the reason you'll be seeing some issues is because you have motion reprojection happening. So you'll need to read through all of this so you can understand what is going on and then the difference between motion reprojection. Speaking of motion reprojection, I have heard of people doing this. If you're using Toolkit, do not use any of the settings here. These are all taken over by Toolkit. If you mess with any of this, it's going to that's this is under rendering, so I'm at 85% of my resolution, and that's over, obvious, the opposite direction. I've tried with everything turned off, sharpening and everything, getting to like 120 or whatever. It's not, that doesn't happen. So if you find, maybe they fix it in the future, but right now that's not a positive. So once you've got this updated, make sure it's always updated, but leave this disabled. If you want to use motion reprojection, use the one in Toolkit. It overrides all of this. All right, and then finally, the last thing on the NVIDIA control panel. So I want to get into NVIDIA real quick. There is some stuff that has changed, and these are the best settings if you want to get the highest FPS without even losing a lot of visuals. So I'm going to go through them pretty quick, but off, this is flat screen, application controlled, off, flat screen, gamma on or off based on if you think it's overwashed or too bright. Somebody says, oh, it's all washed out and it doesn't look good to me anymore. Turn this on or off, see if that makes a difference for you. CSAA I notice is darker than FSAA, but some people said CSAA doesn't work for them, so you have to see if your system is going to be able to run that or not. Transparency off, off for the background, CUDA's all, low latency off, max frame rate off, fixed, because we're not using the monitor, you should have it off on the MSA, again, flat screen. Auto, that's a new feature that they just added. Just leave it on auto, there's no other real good choice. GeForce, preferred maximum performance, application controlled. And here's one we need to talk about, the texture anisotropic filtering. Make sure that's off. And the reason is, if you are already set to high quality, it disables that anyway. All right. Allow on the clamp, on the LED bias, make sure that's allowed. Again, higher performance, it's going to smooth things out. High performance, guys. The difference between high quality and high performance in the VR is night and day. Much smoother, less stuttering, um, everything. It just seems to run a lot better. It definitely works better for VR. Let the toolkit and the sharpening give you all the eye candy that you're looking for. Do not try to do it with artificial, the graphics trying to pop it up. One, you're not going to really see those details anyway, and two, the difference in the picture you're not going to notice except for when you're parked on the runway. And if you want to do that, go in and set your game up to just have maximum everything for photo shots. I mean, you're not flying. So, but if you want performance off, trilinear off, thread on. This is because the game is a CPU hog, and this helps. Triple buffer off, vertical sync off, virtual reality 1. It gets rid of some issues now that they've got the turbo mode. We don't want any of this because that would be like motion sampling. And just I found this to be the best setting. The other ones, auto and native, gave poor performance. So if they do change, if you guys see a change or you say, oh wow, I noticed auto worked a lot better, let people know and then what your system is. So that way they can compare like, oh, the ATI card did this, but the NVIDIA cards in this setup did this, or the NVIDIA and the AMD chip did this, and so on. So we can see if there's any issues there and help people. Last one, I want to go back. I almost forgot. It's in the startup file. It's also in your main game file. Or with my mouse here. Is you need to take a look at smoothing. Alright, so this is another motion reprojection. Here is smoothing. Head smooth, I've turned down to 15%. That's 0.1500 represented in here. You can see that you can do that while you're in game. You hit the escape key, you go up to camera, I believe it is, and you'll see all your options. The same place you turn the head shake off, and I am using the VR head restriction. It has helped with a lot of bug issues. It was actually recommended on the forums if you do any research on that. So definitely do your research, understand what those things are and what they're doing. The big one, like I said in the game, I've seen a lot of people talking about this dynamic resolution factor stuff. Full is off, just so you know. That is the off mode, and then everything down to 0.5. When I did test it at 0.9, 0.8, and 0.7 had some positive effects, but the visuals again brought me back to video games I saw in the early 90s. So not really what I want to go for, but if you want a time machine, that's a fun one to do. If you're like, oh, I want to play a game from the 1990s, that's your game right there. So other than that, you know, you have all of these other options to get rid of. This one here, they do recommend, like I showed you here earlier, to have this set much lower. He has it on a full screen setting, 19 by 1080, just whatever they're showing here. But this one, don't go below 1,000. If you drop this below 1,000, then the HUDs and the menus look like garbage. So it's really not worth it. And when your screen, if you start the game from within VR like I demoed before, that handshake issue to the flat screen and that little mini screen really doesn't actually appear, because I've turned my monitors on after I've got out of VR, and then I see it like, you know, loading the screen for the first time, and like I just booted the computer almost. So it's just like, okay, oh, there is a monitor, now it sends the image. So it's pretty interesting, but keeping that lower than your monitor native resolution is important for a little bit of bump on FPS. Running your FPS monitor when you're flying around all the time, that also hurts your FPS. So having it on while you're testing is fine. I recommend using the Openxr one. When you do any testing, they have that feature inside, you know, inside the games or inside their deal. So I mean, you can see it right here, the overlay FPS advanced. If you go into menu and you turn on the advanced settings, you'll see another additional settings pop up in here. But I use that when I'm testing. I will warn you, it can give you VR sickness if you are already prone to that, because it adds like this object like in your area. The best way to do is offset that from the center of your face. You can change that over here in the menu. You can move where the opaque menu, you can put it up in the corner. I find by putting it on the right or left side of my screen to appear when I use it is better than dead center, because it can cause some issues. for that when you're testing, because it's just taking your focus out of your, it's right in your face. So other than that, guys, if you have any other questions, let me know. I will go over one more item, and that is, you guys need to, if you're using like a 3080 or lower, and I'll demo that here on the 3080 I have, Ti. Mine was an NVIDIA. I found out that if you have, not NVIDIA, but an EVGA card, you can get a free upgrade. If you look on the side of your card, you have that turbo button. It says OC and normal. OC button is just basically getting the factory overclock issue. So one of the things I'm going to demo here is, I'm just going to do this as a quick one, but you need to watch what's called undervolting. For example, I've already done my testing on my card. So I know that at 995, I can bump it up to 1920 here. And then what I'm doing is I'm basically undervolting. I'm not doing this as the example to what to do. I'm just showing you how easy it is. And then once you've done that, you just take them, hold them, and move it over, and then hit enter, and it balances itself out. So it just basically creates an undervolt, and it locks the GPU. Another one is people can slide it up and down, but look for undervolting, how to do it. And I don't know. There's like, I think my mouse might be dying on me. I actually have to. Oh, I know. I reset. But yeah, doing that makes a huge difference, because for me, in fact, I already have one that's done. Where did it go? Load. Don't mess with the RAM. The RAM overclocking is just going to cause a lot of like the snowflake spectering in the game. So it doesn't. If you look at the game, for some reason, that's one I want to bring up. If the programmers are watching and we can get a hold of them, I've tested a lot of people on this. When you're using your FPS in Toolkit to see in advanced mode, it'll show you what your VRAM usage is. The game peaks out at 50% of whatever VRAM you have. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a feature or a bug. But if somehow they could, if opening it up causes crashes or what, but it's literally limiting half of the VRAM for the game. So I had one person had 8, and he was only getting 4 gigs used. I'm getting half of mine used, and so on. And I've seen that as a problem. But what I did here is Actually, I think I set it at 975 was on this particular card. Again, look up undervolting NVIDIA cards so you understand what this is and how it works. But it was real simple. I bumped it up, and then it basically locks me at a higher FPS set. So I'm already at like 1920 solid without hitting more, keeping my card cooler. So not a big problem for you guys liquid cooling, but if you're not liquid cooling, the VRAM can get really hot, and then the card will automatically downclock, basically causing you to get like at lower FPS rates in higher stress areas and even crashes. So there's a way to do that. That's one to look at. And if you want to know about updating your NVIDIA card, if you have the EVGA version, the 3080 Ti or one of those that has the OC switch on it, look up your particular brand and how to flash the BIOS so you can get that basically factory overclock upgrade for free, and then you can enjoy a little bit more of the game. If you guys please like this and share it, and if you know anyone else in the community that needs some help or you have more questions, please keep asking the questions. It helps me make more videos because I can see where are we having problems for players in the game and what can we do to help them. All right, have a good one.